Today we're going to change the electrolytic capacitors in this Samsung TV, and it's so easy that a monkey can do it. There are 18 screws, 19 screws all around the perimeter. Make sure you take all of those out. Put the screws into a container. You'll also want to take off any kind of mounting that you have on the back of the TV. Then lift off the back of the cover. Okay, now that the tape is off, we can now remove the cover of the power supply. Once the cover is off, notice that there are parts of the board labeled hot and cold. It's on the cold side. These are the electrolytic capacitors we need to replace. On the hot side, these ones are okay, but they're rated 450 volts, which means there could be up to that amount stored, and you can get seriously hurt if you touch the bottom of the circuit board and discharge that electricity into you. So be very careful when you handle the board that you only handle the cold side. Next, we want to disconnect all the connectors that go to the power supply circuit board. But first, let's take a look at the orientation of the electrolytic capacitors. This is important because they are polarized, which means that we must put them in with the same polarity as the original ones were. Here, let me show you. You can see a silver band on the side of these two. That's negative. And on the top of these two, that's also negative. So it's a good idea to take pictures before you take everything apart. That way you can refer back to them. So these top two are oriented to the left. These next two are to the right. And the bottom three are oriented to the top. Okay, I've got the connectors disconnected, and they are just laid away from the circuit board. Next, there are 6 screws that hold the board. Take those 6 screws out, and then turn over the board, grabbing it by the heat sinks here. The aluminum extruded heat sinks are safe to touch. What I find holds the board well is a wrapping paper storage container lid. This holds the board up so that the cold area is on the top, and I can get access to both sides while I desolder the electrolytic capacitors. Now, this part of the board right there, those are the 2 terminals of those 450 volt electrolytic capacitors. That's on the hot side. So what I've done is I've cut a piece of cardboard and I'm putting it over that area to remind myself not to touch it. Now I've got the first capacitor taken out, and you can see on the board there is a darker part of the ring where it goes into. That also identifies the negative side of the electrolytic capacitor. Okay, all 7 of them are out. I've got them lined up here. every one of them is 1,000 microfarads. And some of them are rated 10 volt and some are rated 25 volts. I suspect that it's the 10 volt, the smaller ones, that are bad, because you may not be able to see it here, but on the smaller ones, the top of the capacitor is somewhat domed, like it failed. So that's my theory. And what you can do is you can replace capacitors, electrolytic capacitors, with higher rated voltage, and they will last longer, so long as you get the same rating in microfarads. So I suspect 25 volts, which is the larger ones that look okay, will be okay, but I will try to get 50 if the size is similar and I can fit them in on the board. So now it's time to head to Fry's and get the capacitors. I hate that place. Now, I just got back from Fry's and I've got the 1,000 microfarad capacitors installed. They're not soldered in yet, but I wanted to show you how tight they were. Much bigger than the 25 volt. These are all 50 volt, and they cost about $4 each. And I haven't soldered them in or cut off the leads yet, because you want to get them situated and then solder so that they're away from the heat sink as much as possible. Okay, the capacitors are all soldered in now, so let's take a look. Now all we need to do is cut off the leads. Okay, with the leads cut off, we're ready to put the board back on. Okay, with the board screwed in, we're now ready to put the connectors back on around the perimeter. There are about 4 or 5 of them. Alright, cool. The cover is back on now. And don't forget to push the tape, that wire taped to the cover, push that back on so that stays out of the way of the back of the TV. There. TV's back up on the wall. All we need to do is test it now.